On November 11th, 1988, the tranquil city of Charlottetown in Prince Edward Island was struck by tragedy. Byron Carr, a 36-year-old high school teacher, was found dead, lying on his bed, brutally stabbed. He missed a family gathering, which prompted this finding, and a quick check turned out to be cruel.
Front door was locked, and we went around to all the windows, and they were locked, and all the curtains were closed. And I just said to Wally, well, we'll break the basement window like we have to get in. I mean, that's... So Wally went around back, and the back door was open. So he went in and let me in the front door, and we found Barn.
During the police investigation, a surprising revelation emerged. Byron had been hiding a secret, one he had concealed from nearly everyone, including his closest family members. What was the secret Byron had guarded so closely? And could it hold the key to solving this mystery? Byron's family was worried on Friday, November 11th, 1988, when they couldn't get through with phone calls on the evening of their gathering and he didn't show up. They then made the decision to visit him at his Charlottetown home on November 12th. Upon reaching Byron's residence, they discovered that the rear entrance was unlocked. The house appeared untouched from the inside. Dishes were on the counter and his dog barked from its kennel. However, Byron had vanished from sight. They walked over to his bedroom door, and they found Byron lying on the bed there. He had passed away long ago. They discovered he had been stabbed. Their first disbelief gave way to horror.
At first, we didn't see the knife. And I think it was kind of weird just standing in the hallway. And I just went to the phone and we called an ambulance. And then when we took another look and saw the knife and everything, then I just went back to the phone and called. Well, I just called the operator and she got the police. I didn't know the police number. And we called the police and they were there within 5 minutes or so.
The police's arrival prompted an in-depth investigation. It was discovered by investigators that Byron had been strangled and that the stab wound had been inflicted after his death. Police found important evidence among the items in Byron's home. A pair of socks that had been thrown in the trash, and an unusual pair of underwear were discovered at the site. These were bagged for more investigation because they just didn't seem right. When it was discovered that the underwear contained male body fluid from an unidentified man, even Byron's family was horrified to learn the truth. Before he was killed, Byron, who identified as gay, had had a close relationship with a man. The cops talked to his friends to find out his last hours. They discovered that Byron had had coffee with them that evening on November 10th. He had left later to go and see other pals in Charlottetown. He was spotted socializing and having fun at a few pubs that evening, according to witnesses. According to accounts from his friends, Byron picked up a friend and drove them home just before 3 in the morning on November 11th, which is when he was last seen. How was a guy found dead in his own bed after leaving the house for a fun-filled night out? The cops were baffled by the case's circumstances. The search was complicated by Byron's sexual orientation. Friends and witnesses were reluctant to come forward because they were worried about being publicly identified in a community that was not as welcoming of LGBTQ+ people. These elements had a part in the case fast becoming cold. Because of Byron's sexual orientation, some individuals even thought the police weren't treating the case seriously.
Why is the case gone unsolved? What are they doing about it? Are the files closed? Will it ever be solved? Are they treating it as, oh, well, it's, it's just another faggot gone down the drain, one less to worry about? Or are there people back there who really tried, and who's trying now? Why isn't the case solved?
Years would pass before the Charlottetown police made a discovery that would enable them to piece together the details of Byron's final known sighting. When critical information surfaced in 2008, the inquiry dramatically changed course 2 decades after the case had become cold. One eyewitness claimed to have spotted Byron in the early hours of November 11, 1988, not long before he passed away. The witness stated that at approximately 3 in the morning, Byron had pulled over to speak with a man riding a bicycle. Following their short exchange, Byron had gone back toward his house, and the biker had gone the same way, apparently following Byron there as well. Although this material provided fresh insight into the crime, investigators were initially skeptical because it had appeared 20 years later. However, they knew they had a significant lead when the witness cleared a polygraph examination. Police believed that Byron was followed home by this unidentified cyclist, after which the two had had sex. But now, things had gone horribly wrong, and this unidentified man had killed Byron by strangulation. In the years that followed, other witnesses came forward, adding to the mystery. On the evening of November 11th, one person claimed to have observed an unknown car parked outside of Byron's house for a while, before it was quickly driven away. This gave the impression that the murderer had visited Byron's home again later in the day. The murderer, according to the police, either met up with an accomplice at Byron's residence on November 11th, or had returned on his own. They had come back to tidy up the area and get rid of any evidence, including DNA and fingerprints. In order to not leave any evidence, they wore socks. Long after Byron was dead, one of them had stabbed him, possibly to make a more graphic mark. The two had then left the area. One of Byron's old students then made a crucial discovery. There was a mysterious individual who was obsessed with Byron.
That really stands out in my mind, like maybe during those last few months, was Byron telling me about this man who would routinely phone him, who it appeared wanted some sort of relationship, be it long-term, short-term, I don't know. But that Byron was not comfortable being associated with this person. And I remember one evening, Byron said he was just lying on the couch watching television and he fell asleep. And when he woke up, this man was in his house.
Sadly, this didn't really help, and the search ultimately ended up back where it had begun. In an attempt to solve the unsolved crime, investigators then created a profile of the murderer. The murderer was believed to be a young man, perhaps in his early 20s or early 30s, who had a high-risk lifestyle in Charlottetown. They thought the murderer was gay or bisexual and might have had a past of small-time crimes. The two most significant pieces of evidence discovered at the scene were a handwritten letter that said, "I will kill again," and a pair of strange underwear. An examination of the perpetrator's handwriting showed that they had a unique writing style with dotted circles over the eyes and circular motions. Investigators, however, thought the note was more of an angry outburst than a serious threat. According to the scenario, the murderer and his accomplice had gone back to the house in pursuit of the underpants that had been accidentally left behind following their first meeting with Byron. They became enraged and abandoned the threatening note after failing to locate it. The recovered underwear was found to be a medium-sized 29.5-inch waisted Zeller's brand bikini. Years later, in the 2000s, technical developments allowed the researchers to recover DNA from the fabric sample by analyzing the male body fluids. The results showed that the DNA did not belong to Byron and did not match anyone in the national database, which is a strong indicator that the murderer was the owner. DNA was also found in the abandoned pair of socks, which was another important piece of evidence. Police kept the identity of the individual who had worn the socks a secret, even though they were able to identify them. This person was the killer's accomplice, but the investigation came to a regrettable stop because they had passed away in the late 1990s. No matter how long it took, the Charlottetown police were still committed to finding Byron's killer. They obtained DNA samples from all those who might have been associated with Byron, including guys he could have come across at the pubs that evening, but they were unable to find a match. 2 mysterious phone calls from an unidentified male were made to the police in 2018, close to Charlottetown Mall. His voice was urgent, as he claimed to know essential details about Byron's murder. But as swiftly as he had appeared, he was gone, leaving no sign of who he was or how to get in touch with him. Over 30 years had gone by since Byron's terrible death, yet the truth was still elusive. Even though the authorities thought they had found the accomplice, Byron's killer's identity remained a mystery. Then, out of the blue, a discovery was made that gave the inquiry a fresh start. The Byron Carr murder case gave authorities some hope after 35 long years. In the spring of 2022, investigators made a risk. They examined the evidence from the scene of the crime again and tested the underwear's genetic makeup. In an attempt to match the DNA profile with the killer's family, this meant uploading it to databases used for genetic testing. Although it took a while, the effort paid off. The police finally had a lead in January of 2024.
At 11:55 a.m. yesterday morning, the Charlottetown Police Services arrested Todd Joseph Gallant, age 56, of Surrey.
At the time of the murder, Todd Joseph Gallant, who is currently 56 years old, would have only been 21. For many, memories of that horrific November day in 1988 undoubtedly returned. The name Gallant was not unfamiliar to the investigators. He was convicted of breaking and entering in Prince Edward Island back in 1987. He had lived in Charlottetown then, not far from Byron Carr. Shortly after the murder, he relocated to the U.S. and eventually made his way back to Charlottetown in 2022. Gallant was detained on January 26, 2024 in connection with the murder of Byron Carr. He was accused of first-degree murder and interfering with human remains. Things were beginning to come together. But the questions outweighed the solutions. What had actually occurred that evening? What could have been the motivation for Gallant's crime? The family of Byron is still waiting on justice. As soon as Gallant was formally charged with the murder by the Charlottetown police, John, Byron's brother, shed tears. John talked about his brother with much affection.
It's been a long 35 years. Sad that the case went on for 35 years. Both our parents, mom and dad, have passed away and weren't here to take part in this process today. This would have been very important to them as the next step in pursuing justice for Byron.
Prejudices in society and the fear of outing witnesses presented numerous difficulties for the investigation, leaving many unsolved questions. They are holding out hope that Gallant's sentencing will resolve this long-running case and spotlight the larger problems of prejudice and violence against the LGBTQ+ community as the trial approaches. Is there more to the story? Or was Byron Carr's murder motivated by hatred because of his sexual orientation? Though it is now hidden, the truth will eventually come to light.